Wyoming Territory, July 1884. The day Loretta Tisdale ran barefoot through dry grass and pine needles. The wind tore her veil clean off, and she never once looked back. The church bell in Elk Hollow still rang behind her, clanging like a warning. She did not stop. Not when her silk shoes slipped off in the mud. Not when her corset pinched so tight she saw stars. She ran until the hush of the pines swallowed the church, the guests, and the man waiting at the altar who she had never wanted. Her breath came ragged, her legs scratched with burrs, but her heart beat with something close to freedom. She had no plan, only distance in mind. No satchel, no horse, just a torn wedding dress and the ache of knowing she had almost let her life be taken. By sundown, her feet were raw, her throat dry, and the mountains had gone from distant blue to towering shadows. She stumbled into a clearing, half delirious, and fell to her knees. The scent of pine and dust filled the air. She curled against a rock, eyes fluttering shut. She would sleep here, maybe die here. At least she had chosen it. Then came hoofbeats. Not the polished clatter of town men, but a slow, heavy gait. She blinked, trying to lift her head. A figure dismounted tall, broad-shouldered, dust-covered. His hat shadowed his face, but the voice that followed was low and steady. "Madam, you hurt." Loretta tried to sit up, but her legs shook. "Do not. Take me back," she whispered. The man knelt beside her. His hands were work-worn, gentle as he lifted her from the ground. "I am not taking you anywhere you do not want to go," he said. "Name's Declan Lark. You are safe now." She passed out in his arms. When she woke, it was morning, and she was wrapped in a wool blanket inside a weather-worn cabin smelling of cedar smoke and coffee. Her dress had been folded neatly on a chair, the mud and blood washed from her feet. Her corset hung from a nail on the wall. She sat up fast, heart thudding. "Easy," Declan said from the corner, stirring something in a pot over the fire. "You fainted. You are all right now." She stared at him. He was no stranger from the church. His shirt was threadbare, sleeves pushed to his elbows, arms strong from ranch work. A rifle leaned beside the door. He looked older than her by a few years, steady eyes, unshaven jaw, brown hair that curled where it met his collar. "You found me. You were half dead," he said. "Out there in a wedding dress like some ghost come loose." Loretta swallowed hard. "I ran." That much was clear. He handed her a tin cup. She drank, the warm broth easing her throat. "You got a name?" he asked. "Loretta Tisdale." He nodded. "Well, Miss Tisdale, this is my place. I ranch cattle mostly, up in the hills. You can rest here as long as you need." She looked down at her hands. "I do not know where to go." He did not press her, just handed her a slice of bread. Outside, the wind moved through the trees. Inside, the silence was kinder. By the fourth day, she was feeding the chickens out back, while Declan hammered fence posts. He never asked what she had run from. She never offered more than she wanted to. But she watched him, the way he moved with quiet purpose. How he spoke little but always noticed when her hands trembled and passed her tea without a word. On the sixth day, she helped patch the roof. She was barefoot again, her shoes beyond repair, but she did not care. "You ever plan on going back?" Declan asked, not looking up from the shingles. "No," she said. "My father arranged it. The man. He was cruel. I would rather die than go back to that house." Declan's jaw tightened. "Then you will not." She looked at him. "Why are you helping me?" He met her eyes. "Because you were running. And I have spent most of my life knowing what that feels like." The wind picked up. She reached for the next nail. That night, she sat by the fire, her dress replaced by a wool shirt of his and a blanket around her shoulders. Declan poured them both coffee. She caught him watching her nod in the way men used to, like they were measuring something, but like he was learning. "You are not like anyone I have ever met," she said. "I used to be a different man. Before I left Texas. Before the war." He did not say more, but she saw the edge of it in his eyes, some old hurt, buried deep. "You build things here," she said softly. "I try to." She looked around the cabin. It was rough, but full of care. Hooks carved by hand. A rocking chair by the hearth. A coat rack made from antlers. "No one ever built anything for me before," she said. He looked down into his cup. Maybe it is time someone did. By the 10th day, she woke before him and made biscuits. He stepped into the kitchen, hair tousled, shirt half-buttoned, and froze. "You cook?" he asked. I do now. He grinned, the first real grin she had seen from him. She set the plate down and smiled. You found me barefoot. I figure it is only right I learn how to stand on my own 2 feet now. Declan's gaze lingered. You already are. Later, they rode out to the edge of the property. She rode side saddle on his mare, her arms around his waist. The fields rolled out golden in the sun, the mountains watching from afar. He stopped near the creek and helped her down. She turned to him, unsure why her hands shook. Thank you, she said. For what? For giving me a place to be. Declan stepped closer. Loretta, when I first saw you, I figured you were trouble. But you are more than that. You are brave. And you are starting to feel like something I never thought I would have again. She looked up at him. What is that? He brushed a strand of hair from her face. Home. Her breath caught. Declan, he kissed her. It was not rushed or uncertain. It was slow, steady, like everything else he did. Like he meant it. When they pulled apart, she whispered, I never thought I would feel safe with a man. You were safe with me. Always. She rested her forehead to his. I believe you. And she truly did. A week after the creek, Loretta stood at the edge of Declan's pasture, her hem caught in the wind, watching the cattle ease through the high grass. The land unfolded wide and golden, cut with shallow gullies and scattered with granite outcroppings. The air smelled like sun-warmed earth, and something in her chest felt steadier than it had in years. Declan came up behind her, wiping his hands on a rag. His boots were caked in dry mud from digging a new post hole near the south fence line. You ever worked leather? He asked. She turned from the field. No. I watched my brother do it once, but he never let me try. He nodded toward the shed. You've got good hands. If you want, I can show you how to cut a harness. Inside, the shed was lined with tools worn smooth from use. He pulled down a strip of rawhide from a wooden peg and set it across the bench. She took the knife he offered and tested the edge with her thumb. Keep the blade steady, he said, and let the weight of your arm do most of the work. Don't fight it. She pressed the steel through the hide, the scent of oiled leather rising. Her cut wavered. Again, he said, quiet. She tried again. The line came straighter. You're good at teaching, she said. He leaned against the wall, arms crossed. Had to be for a while. Took in my sister's boy for a spell. Taught him to mend tack, trim hooves, read road signs. Loretta looked up. Where is the boy now? Back in San Saba. His pa came for him once he got steady work at the rail yard. That was 3 winters back. She ran her fingers along the leather. You ever think of going back? Not once. The knife slipped through the final inch of hide. She handed it to him. You miss anything about it? Only the smell of mesquite after rain, he said. But this place, it's the only one that ever felt like it didn't need fixing. She folded the strip carefully. Maybe that's why I ended up here. Declan didn't answer right away. The silence between them was easy now. Most folks only see what they expect, he said at last. When I found you, I didn't expect you'd stay. I didn't either, she said. He held her gaze. But I'm glad you did. That night, she stepped outside after supper while he banked the coals. The moon hung low and orange over the ridge. Somewhere far off, a coyote called once and went quiet. She walked to the porch rail and pressed her palm to the rough wood. The wind moved through the grass in long, slow waves. Declan joined her, his hat in his hands. Was thinking, he said, if you're set on not going back to town, I could register you as working here. That way if anyone comes asking, you're accounted for. She looked over at him, the starlight catching the edge of his jaw. You do that? I would. I don't want to hide, she said, voice low. But I don't want to be taken either. No one's taking you, he said. Not while I've got 2 hands and a rifle. Her throat tightened. You make it sound easy. It ain't. But it's true. She reached out and touched his arm. The warmth of him steadied her. Then yes, she said. List me. I'll work. He nodded once. They stood like that for a while, the night humming around them, neither one moving. The next morning, Loretta took to the shed early, determined to finish the harness. She'd tied her hair back with a scrap of muslin and rolled her sleeves to the elbow. The hide had stiffened overnight, but her hands were surer now. She worked in silence, the only sounds the rustle of birds and the creak of the barn door. Declan stepped in and leaned his shoulder to the frame. Looks like you figured it. She held up the finished strap. Think it'll hold. He took it from her, ran his fingers along the edge. Strong cut. Clean holes. It'll hold. She smiled, small and proud. Come with me, he said. I want to show you something. They saddled the horses. She rode one of the younger geldings, a pale roan with a mild gait, and followed the trail up toward the ridge. The climb was steep, but the view from the top opened wide over the valley, the river like a silver thread in the distance. This land here, Declan said, pointing to the east slope. I've been clearing it slow. Soil's good. If you plant right, it'll feed 2 people easy. She turned to him. Are you offering it to me? I'm offering it to us. Loretta looked at the sky, then back at the slope, then at him. I never thought I'd be asked if I wanted a piece of something. Not like this. Well, he said, I never thought I'd be the one asking. She dismounted and walked a few steps down the trail, boots crunching over stones. He followed. You really want me here? She asked, not turning. Yes. She let the air settle between them. Then she turned and came to stand before him. I want to plant something that'll stay, she said. He nodded. Then we'll start with that. She reached for his hand, and he took it. No rush, no promises yet spoken, but the grip was firm. It meant they'd start building. And they would. By the middle of August, the mornings came cooler. Loretta woke earlier now, with the habit of work in her bones. She'd taken to tending the vegetable rows just past dawn, when the dew still clung to the leaves and the soil was soft underfoot. The garden wasn't much, just beans, squash, and a few rows of corn, but it was hers to coax into life. She liked the feel of the earth under her nails, the quiet rhythm of tending something that would give back. Declan had gone into Elk Hollow that morning to trade for salt and lamp oil. He hadn't asked if she wanted to come. He never asked her to go where she didn't mean to. She liked that about him. She was peeling bark from kindling when she heard hooves again, not one rider, but 2. She stood, the hat she wore slipping back on its string. The men who rode into the yard didn't look like ranchers. One wore a black coat too stiff for riding. The other had a badge on his chest. You the woman goes by Tisdale? The man with the badge asked. She didn't answer right away. Her heart beat steady now, not from fear, but from the weight of choice. I am, she said. I'm Deputy Weller. This here's Mr. Jennings. He's come from Kansas City, on behalf of your father. She didn't move. The wind shifted the dust at their boots. Your father claims you were taken against your will, the deputy said, though his voice held no belief in the words. I wasn't, Loretta said. I left. On my own. Jennings stepped forward, a polished man with soft hands. Miss Tisdale, I've been instructed to escort you home. Your family is waiting. I've got no family there, she said. Only men who traded me like a ledger entry. That's not your decision to make, Jennings replied. You're not married. You're not under contract. You're still under the protection of your father's household. I'm not under anyone, she said, louder now. I'm working here. I've got wages and a place to sleep. The deputy looked at her. You have a record of employment? He does, she said, glancing toward the barn. Declan had returned without her hearing. He dismounted slow, eyes on the men but calm, like he was sizing up a fence line. She's listed, he said. Took her on as seasonal help. I've got the ledger in the house. Jennings looked ready to protest, but the deputy raised a hand. If she's employed and not making a complaint, it's not our place to remove her. Jennings turned to Loretta. You'll regret this. She didn't flinch. I already regret staying silent as long as I did. They left without another word. Loretta watched until the dust settled behind them. Declan stepped beside her, his hand grazing hers. You all right? She nodded. I didn't shake. No, you didn't. That night, she didn't sit across the hearth from him. She sat beside him, close enough that their shoulders touched. The fire threw soft gold onto the walls, and the kettle hissed low. You knew they'd come, she said. I figured they might. Why didn't you tell me? Didn't want it weighing on you if it never happened. She looked down at her hands. Most men would have told me to hide. I'm not most men. She turned her face toward him. What are you? I'm the one who wants to build a life with you, if you want the same. Her voice came soft, but certain. I do. He reached for her hand then, not cautious, not unsure. She laced her fingers through his. I never thought peace would feel like this, she whispered. He leaned close, his breath warm at her temple. It's not peace unless you get to choose it. She rested her head against his shoulder. Then I choose you. Outside, the wind moved through the pines, steady and low. Inside, The fire burned slow, and neither of them moved to put it out. The first frost came early, clinging to the fence rails and turning the pasture silver under dawn. Loretta pulled her shawl tighter as she stepped onto the porch, steam curling from the coffee in her tin mug. From the barn, she heard the low murmur of Declan's voice, steady as always, speaking to the animals like they were kin. She smiled into the cup, let the heat ease into her hands. They'd built a rhythm, not spoken of but understood. She kept the garden, mended seams, pressed herbs between cloth to dry for winter. He worked the cattle, repaired the roof, split wood until the pile behind the house stood taller than her. They shared meals, rode fence lines, read aloud from old books in the evenings when the wind howled against the shutters. But that morning, when Declan came in, brushing straw from his sleeves, there was something tucked into the line of his mouth that hadn't been there before. "Riders came through," he said, setting his gloves on the bench. "Ava and her husband from Three Pines. Said the river's rising fast near the southern edge. Might flood the low pastures." Loretta set down her mug. "What do we need to do?" He glanced toward the window. "Drive the cattle up toward the ridge. Won't be easy. They're spread wide, and the slope's rough." "I'll ride with you," she said without pause. His brow lifted. "It'll be a long day. I've done harder things." He didn't argue. He only reached for the saddle blanket. They left within the hour, the sound of hooves muffled by frozen grass. The sky stretched pale and empty above them, clouds thin like pulled wool. They didn't speak much, focused on the work. Loretta took the western edge of the herd, guiding the stragglers uphill with a coil of rope Declan had taught her to throw. By afternoon, her thighs ached from the saddle, and her palms were raw from the leather reins. But when Declan rode up beside her, checking the line of cattle now grazing higher ground, his nod held quiet approval. "Didn't lose a one," he said. She wiped an arm across her brow. "They listen better than people." He chuckled low, not loud but real. "That's true enough." They made camp on the ridge, too tired to ride back. Declan built a fire from dry pine branches, and she handed him the bread wrapped in oilcloth from her saddlebag. They sat across from one another, knees nearly touching, eating in silence. After a while, she said, "Do you ever miss being alone?" He looked into the fire, then at her. "No, not once." She nodded, eyes on the flames. "I used to think I'd always be on someone's terms. First my father's, then a husband's. I didn't know there was another way." "There is," he said. "You're living it now." She reached for the edge of his coat, brushed her fingers there. "I know I've been careful. Slow. Don't need to explain. I want to stay." He set down his cup. "You already are." "No, I mean," she met his gaze. "Not as someone passing through. I want to build something with you. I want to call this mine, too." He didn't speak right away, just reached for her hand, turned it over in his. "Then we'll start laying it down. Together." The wind shifted through the pines behind them, the fire popping. She leaned forward, pressed her lips to his in the quiet. It was not their first kiss, but it was the first she gave him without fear behind it. When she pulled back, he rested his forehead to hers. "I'll build whatever you want, Loretta," he said. "So long as you're beside me." She smiled then, soft and certain. "I'm not going anywhere." And she meant it. The snow came soft and early that November, blanketing the hills in silence. Loretta stood at the window of the cabin, her breath fogging the glass as she watched the flakes drift down. Declan was outside, mending the south door of the chicken coop before the cold hardened the wood too much to take a nail. His coat flapped in the wind, and she could just make out the rhythm of his hammer between gusts. She turned from the window, the warmth of the stove brushing her cheeks. A kettle hung steady on the hook, and the bread she'd baked that morning was cooling near the hearth. There was peace in the room, but her fingers fidgeted over the folded piece of paper she'd been carrying around for a week now. It was creased from handling, the ink faint where her thumb had worn it. When Declan stepped back inside, pulling off his gloves and stamping his boots, she met him near the table. "You get it patched?" she asked. "Held better than I figured it would," he said, setting his gloves on the bench. "Won't hold out the wind forever, but it'll do for now." She hesitated, then laid the paper down between them. "This came in the freight wagon. The woman who runs the post office slipped it to me when she saw my name." He looked at it, but didn't reach for it. "From Kansas?" She nodded. "My father passed. Weeks ago." Jennings included the deed to the house in town, said it's mine now. There's money in the estate. Declan's expression didn't change, but something in his stance went still. You thinking about going back? No, she said it without pause. But I want to sell it. Every board in that house feels like a weight I don't want to carry. Declan pulled out a chair and Saturday, you don't need my say. I want it anyway. He studied her face. Then sell it. Take what's owed. You earned your life same as any man who carved his way west. She sat across from him, slow. And if I use the money to build a new room on this cabin? He blinked once. You want to expand? I want a sewing space, she said. And a cradle. Eventually. For a long breath, he didn't speak. Then he leaned forward, elbows on the table. You sure? She nodded. I am. He reached across and took her hand, his thumb brushing the side of her wrist, slow and deliberate. Then we'll start it in spring. Come thaw, we'll set the posts. You draw the plans how you want. She smiled, the kind that reached her eyes. I already started. That night, the wind howled outside, but the walls held. They lay side by side beneath the quilt, her back against his chest, his arm heavy over her waist. The fire had burned low, casting long shadows across the floorboards. Declan, she whispered, her voice slow with sleep. I want to marry you. If you want that too. He drew in a breath behind her, buried his face against her shoulder. I do, he said. More than anything I've ever known. The next morning, they rode into Elk Hollow together. The preacher's wife met them at the door, her eyes gentle and her hands warm as she wrapped Loretta in a shawl and led her inside. There were no guests, no lace, no veil. Just clean clothes, a quiet room, and two hands joined over a worn Bible. After, they rode home through the snow, the horses picking slow steps along the ridge. Declan's gloved hand found hers as they crossed the creek, and she squeezed it once, firm. By February, the new room had been framed, with windows facing the sunrise and a door that opened onto the slope where the wildflowers would bloom come May. Loretta sewed curtains from flour sacks, humming as she worked, a pot of stew simmering behind her. Declan came in from the cold, cheeks flushed, and wrapped his arms around her waist from behind. She leaned into him, setting her needle aside. Barn owls nesting near the fence, he said against her neck. Looks like she means to stay. Then we ought to let her, she murmured. That spring, she planted 3 rows of lavender, just beneath the window of the new room. Declan built her a bench from pine, and most evenings they sat there together, watching the light fade over the hills, her head resting on his shoulder. When the baby came, it was late August, after a heat wave had cracked the earth, and just before the rains returned. Declan stayed at her side through every hour, his brow damp, his hands steady. Their daughter arrived with a full head of dark hair and a cry that rang clear. They named her Clara. Loretta placed her in Declan's arms, their fingers brushing as they passed her between them. She's got your eyes, Loretta said, voice rough with wonder. He looked down at the tiny face, then up at her. And your fight. They never left the ridge. The house grew slowly. Another room added the following year, a porch swing carved the year after that. Clara learned to walk between rows of beans and speak her first words beside the chicken coop. She followed her mother into the garden and her father into the barn, growing strong on the land that had given them all a second chance. Years later, when the wind blew through the pines, Loretta would still pause in the doorway some evenings, watching Declan out in the pasture, Clara chasing the calves behind him. She'd press a hand to her chest and feel the steady thrum beneath her ribs, the rhythm of a life chosen, not given. And every time Declan looked back at her and smiled, she knew she had done more than run. She had arrived. She had stayed. She had built something that would last.